Hi, I'm Andrew Moriarty, Senior Pricing Analyst here at Mintec, and I have with me the results of the survey that we did on coffee a couple of weeks ago. So I thought I would just share with you some of the responses that we had from our respondents. And the first question was about expectations for Brazil's 2021 crop. And just to clarify, when I say 2021 crop, I'm referring to the crop that's being harvested right now, the one that's wrapping up here in the next few weeks, this on-cycle crop that Brazil's currently going through. So we had a pretty huge range of responses here, from a low of about 55 million bags to highs of 70 million bags. Now, just to kind of put out there for clarification, the USDA's most recent forecast that were released a few months ago had production somewhere around 67.9 million bags, which is very much on the sort of upper end of the responses that we received. So it seems to me like on average, most of our respondents were perhaps slightly more pessimistic than the USDA about what Brazil's output is going to be. So kind of an interesting result there. And then on question 2, that question was about what people saw as the sort of most viable way to secure economic viability for producers going forward. And perhaps somewhat surprisingly, we saw nearly half of all respondents favoring direct sourcing. And just to clarify what we mean by direct sourcing, that's typically a mechanism where roasters and traders go directly to origin, working with producers and cooperatives to pay typically substantially higher than the prevailing market rates, and potentially having long-term supply agreements coming off the back of that as well. So that's direct sourcing contrasted to the way that the majority of coffee is bought. Now, 20% of respondents favored a global minimum price, the kind of thing that you might see in fair trade. And then an additional 20% wanted to see diffs continuing to be priced off of the exchanges, what you might call sort of the status quo in coffee. And then 13% wanted to move away from futures to outright pricing. Now, one of the questions that throws up for me, and you see this again in certain types of specialty coffees, fair trade quite common because of that minimum price threshold. One of the questions that throws up to me is if the coffee continues to be delivered against actuals or like an exchange futures for physical kind of situation, then does that reduce the usefulness of the exchanges to actually hedge the price of that if you don't have that full breakdown? Does it reduce some degree of price transparency? It's a question that's out there because maybe basis risk might be too high in that kind of situation if you can't break out that differential from the terminal price. Now, question 3 was in terms of the voluntary sustainability schemes. So things like Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, 4C. How do you see their role in the industry going forward? And we had some pretty interesting responses there as well. Now, over half of the respondents actually favored them, saying that they should become the standard, which is perhaps a little bit surprising, whereas 27% saw them as being potentially useful for certain varieties from certain origins, but perhaps not the standard. And then 20% favored a different option such as direct sourcing. Now, there is a suspicion that we didn't measure in this survey and perhaps might be useful to include going forward, that we might see those respondents that were closer to the consumer end of things favoring these standards as becoming the standard, whereas those potentially closer to the physical trade typically tending to favor the status quo, but that's simply just conjecture at this point. It's something to maybe measure in future surveys. And then question 4 is really the big question of our times right now, which is the degree to which COVID-19 has impacted your business. Now, as you can see on the chart, quite a number of people, nearly 40%, said that shipments had been slower, but they were still able to get all of the varieties from all of the origins that they wanted. It was only just over 5% who said that there were certain varieties they could no longer get. And then in terms of orders, we had a large number of respondents, over 25%, as you can see, saying that their orders had decreased compared to the sort of normal time period. And then we had actually several people, over 10%, saying that their orders had increased. No doubt that's sort of more the at-home side of the industry. So, take a look at those, and I'll be sending this out by email. For anybody who would like it, feel free to get in touch with me. And then the final 2 questions, questions 5 and 6, were about prices. So where do you see the price of the spot price in New York and the spot price in London in about 6 months' time? Now, this is potentially a difficult question to ask at the time that this survey was being done, because we were in the middle of seeing a pretty substantial rally of about almost 17% in New York during the middle of the survey period. And we've also seen, just for reference, our Mintec benchmark prices for some of these differentials changing as well. So we've seen, for example, the Brazil Santos Mintec benchmark price drop quite substantially from a discount of several cents down to a discount of 12 cents. And then we've seen the Colombian Excelso EP differential that we have go from about 60-cent premium down to about 55 now and continuing to fall. So we're seeing those benchmark prices moving in the opposite direction, but we've seen the terminal price increase quite substantially, again 17% in New York. So as you can see from the chart behind me, in Arabica, almost half of the respondents said that they saw the price being higher in 6 months' time, 47%. Now, a third of people saw that price being lower and 20% unchanged. And that's perhaps not entirely surprising. I think what was kind of more interesting was how this differed from the Robusta results, which I'll put up on the screen now. And you can see that in that case, only 40% of respondents saw the prices being higher in 6 months' time. Again, actually a third seeing them being lower, and then 27% of respondents seeing those prices unchanged. So that completes the survey results. I'll be doing another one in good time. And again, I will be sending out an email with a summary of these results. If you would like it and you don't think you're on my list, feel free to get in touch with me at pricing@mintecglobal.com, not only for the survey results, but for any queries you might have about pricing, any inputs you'd like to have, or if you'd just like to discuss the market, always happy to talk. Thank you very much.